Welcome to the Christopher Peter Review, your source of common sense commentary on salient current events. In this podcast episode, I'm going to discuss the topic of identity and our societal obsession with it. While one's identity is important to knowing who they might be as a person, one's race, gender, and other demographics really provide only a small portion of who they are. Our backgrounds help shape us in many ways, but it really is the individual decisions, attitudes, and behaviors that make the difference for us. In many ways, it is foolish to look at people and judge them either favorably or unfavorably in regards to traits they had no choice in. We are also going to discuss related issues that exist, like the debate over privilege, balancing interests, and how to improve and navigate the hysteria-driven society that does not generally hold a rational view on the topic. Let us begin this special episode with Jennifer providing the perspective of this conversation.
Our demographic identity is generally regarded as one's racial makeup, biological gender, the religion they practice or lack thereof, political affiliation, geographic location, ideological leaning, and career and educational background. These factors play a role in how we behave in society, our needs and expectations, and the manner that others may engage with us, treat us, or view us, both in a good and positive manner, and the not-so-good and completely bad manner, and everything in between. The goal is generally to move away from people looking at another person, generating superficial opinions and judgments on that person, and acting upon those opinions and judgments. People have the freedom to think what they want and believe what they want. But when your thoughts lead your actions, choices, and attitudes to infringe on the freedoms of others, then you do not have the complete freedom, because one's freedom cannot infringe on another person's freedom. In the idea of equal access and opportunity to freedom, there are social challenges to the issue of identity. Does identity matter, and should it? What happens when a person just decides they will claim a completely different identity simply to appease some mental health-related issue or to pursue a devious want? Also, who is allowed to claim pride in their identity is also a topic greatly debated. There is an unresolved discussion here. Should everyone be able to claim pride in whatever their identity is, and not care about who claims offense?
You really cannot judge a person by the way they look. There have been many times in my life where people have looked at me and made completely incorrect assumptions about how I might think about certain topics, what my politics might be, what my education level might consist of, what religion I practice. Sometimes, I take joy in pointing out their incorrect assumptions or showing them how their views are completely incorrect. We cannot assume a person is good, bad, or anything in between simply because of what they look like. We may have some kind of inklings based on our biases or exposure to news broadcasts. That is natural in certain situations. There are always stereotypes of all people, some good, some bad. How can you know that the person you see without any knowledge of their character is associated with the bad? Before we act, we should know a bit more about them, especially if there is no direct act, just an appearance. In many ways, I differ greatly from people that look like me. First, I am biracial. Neither race is white, so I have a blended background of cultural values. So people sometimes think I would agree with certain positions when I do not. For instance, I have had many conversations with people who are shocked to hear that I do not hold an irrational fear of police and that I support law enforcement. Some people, especially progressives, feel that all people of color should fear the police. I have no problem telling them the many times that the police have shown me great kindness and helped me over the years. While they feel I am the exception to the norm, they never question that maybe their position is flawed. We should always question why we assume something or believe something is the way we perceive it to be. People sometimes show great ignorance by acting on assumptions, and it can have great consequences to how they are perceived afterwards. I remember visiting an MBA program where the presenter kept thinking I was in the wrong room and program, not sure that my business suit, like all the other candidates, made me not fit in. After discussing my qualifications during a break, after she once again questioned me, she changed her tune and mentioned that I would be a great fit. I took great pleasure in telling her that I was no longer interested, and made it a point to highlight shortcomings of their program compared to ranked schools during the next session, which led others to question the school's credibility. Gone are the days where you can judge a book by its cover. Many people lose sales to qualified consumers because they make the wrong assumptions about people. Many companies lose out on qualified candidates or high-performing employees because they cannot get away from outdated thinking. We all have our individual demographics, but we are more than what we look like, what we believe, or how we speak. We are all unique individuals, and it helps to get to know the individual before deciding to accept or reject a person. I think that works both ways. You should neither accept nor reject someone because of the demographics. Wokeness in any manner is not a great approach to anything. Our society has evolved into one that is far too sensitive and too quick to find ways to claim offense when there is no purposeful intent in a given action. Intent matters in certain situations, and intent should be deemed purposeful and direct before making a mountain of a molehill. I do believe that identity is important to an individual. The traditions of our upbringing, experiences with people around us, quality of education, and values that guide our personal moral codes can shape our behaviors, choices, and views of the world. We all possess a different paradigm of the world. Even though we may have many commonalities, we are all unique individuals. Looks can be deceiving. Two people may look the same, talk the same, eat the same type of food, pray the same manner, but have completely unique views, needs, and leanings. I generally believe that we should respect the rights, freedoms, and welfare of others. We are all living on this spinning rock together. But I also believe that others do not have a societal duty to care about the intricacies of others, and what may offend or not offend. That may sound harsh or shocking, but again, there is a complete difference between purposeful and unintentional. Purposeful attempts to offend others or demean another person or groups. That is clearly wrong because there was a choice to proceed in that manner. I do not subscribe to the should-have-known idea that each and every person must be accountable for knowing what other groups are offended by, might be offended by, and are planning to be offended by in the future. Like the recent story about the no U-turn signs. If true, that is crazy leaning that should not be accommodated. There are places that need restrictions or U-turns, and that is about driving safety, not identity politics. But people will use and say anything to push a narrative. There is nothing wrong with choosing to be a person that goes out of your way to avoid offending others and be compassionate to others. I generally try to be nice to others, and afford everyone I meet the basic level of decency, good manners, and compassion where appropriate. But I do not think we should automatically assume or project that responsibility out on others in society. All too often do I hear others claim every action to be racist, sexist, or discriminatory when the facts, evidence, and data prove that it is not. Many times I have discussed events that I personally witnessed, had to point out that the perception of racism was not justified, because of the litany of evidence that the person did not want to acknowledge, because it meant admitting that they were not living up to their agreed-upon terms. There is no denying that real, direct, and purposeful actions occur in our society. Many may go unnoticed, others get exaggerated, but I do not think that we need to operate in fear. We should just lower our expectations and understand that people are sometimes going to say things that might make us cringe. Unless they are doing it with direct intent, let it go. Watching one of my favorite sports talk shows, Speak, Joy Taylor proclaimed that in sports you should be treated fair, not equal. That may seem shocking, but she is correct and very reasoned, as she usually is. The point she made was that star athletes are always treated better than other players. A star makes a mistake in football, they may get chewed out and asked to repeat the play. A regular player may get cut from the team. Even in the leagues with the guaranteed contracts, Shaq always talks about stars and the others. In the NBA, it is said that the referees will not even listen to a single word from a person who is not a star player. I do believe that if you work harder, achieve more, and contribute greater to society, your organization, or community, you deserve to be treated better than others that do far less. But how is that fair? Because as long as you have an equal opportunity to do the same, then you are not being treated any differently. If you cannot do the same as another, then why should you believe that your concerns are more valid than theirs? Our society is a meritocracy. If you want your voice heard more in the office, then you have to improve your contributions, achievements, and visibility. The high achievers get more attention because they deliver results and create the value that pays the others as well. From a leadership perspective, there is an importance to credit the efforts of others, because everyone does play a part, just some parts are not as expendable as others. From an operational perspective, the organization needs to know who the stars are and keep them happy. The idea of people being treated differently and being okay with it may seem counter to the topic of identity, but I think we can all agree that performance-based privilege is acceptable, and that identity-based privilege is not acceptable. I do think there is some level of privilege in our society, but I feel it is highly exaggerated, many times by voices that rather project blame outward to society, instead of accepting responsibility for elevating their station in life and lifting themselves up. Again, I do agree with performance-based privilege, not identity based on inherited privilege. I do think that there are problems with people recruiting from or providing opportunities to those from their Rolodex or predetermined pools, not just from the white majority either. Now, we know that people who are born to high achievers or associate with high achievers will do better than those who are not. But we also know that people have the opportunity to elevate themselves and their situations. The American dream is not a myth, but a dogma that evolves with time. Be the person you want to be. Now, I know there is a whole another discussion about gender identity or people identifying as things that make no sense. That is not what this section is about. This is not a mental health discussion. I am talking about controlling the narrative around your future, your outcomes, and your opportunity. Being able to put your unique abilities, traits, and factors out for the world to see rather than conforming to what some in our society want to define you as. The whole raising of the topic of demographic identity in our society I thought would be a useful one. But, like many things the left does, the purpose behind raising the issue was simply to drive narratives and accommodate a new kind of demographic-based tension. Where I thought the discussion might go was toward the idea of breaking stereotypes completely, rather than simply trying to replace one set of inaccurate stereotypes with another set of inaccurate stereotypes. I'd rather be a stereotype breaker by setting my own path than disseminating narratives that are also not accurate. Set your own narrative and accept the responsibility that comes with it. In America, we succeed or fail by our own efforts, expectations, and perseverance. What others think is really immaterial unless you allow yourself to believe it too. When I reflect upon my background and other factors that may make up my identity in the eyes of the public, my born into demographics may have set the foundation for some things in my life, but the individual choices are what made the difference. In many ways, what we learn during our youth sets the foundation for our futures. That is what is supposed to happen. But we can make the decisions to determine what remains in our foundation and what needs to be updated, replaced, or reaffirmed. For instance, I learned many great lessons growing up in a multicultural household in a small rural community in New Jersey, an upbringing that instilled values of educational achievement, hard work, faith, community service, and many other lessons. But I also took steps to challenge my foundational beliefs and determine what the right path is for me. I never was the type of person that does anything simply because it is what someone tells me to, or it is always done that way. I usually want to determine if that process is truly the best approach, or if I would truly achieve what I am seeking that way. For instance, my siblings and I went to Mass weekly because we were told to during our youth. My parents were religious. Although both of my parents were raised in different denominations of Christianity, the local Catholic parish was welcoming my family, so that is where we worshipped. After leaving for college and even afterwards, I had questions about faith and even distanced myself to give me space to seek the answers. I took time to understand more about faith, what I truly believed in, and went beyond just learning the traditions. I learned about the history and reasonings that my local parish did not teach us. I found a new parish that fit me. There are some parts of our backgrounds that we will readily accept as part of our identity, other areas that we need to put our own spin or reasoning behind, and some areas that we reject and replace with something that is better fitted to our individual self. Personally, I hold different social and political views than many people in my family, and even those who look like me. I never accepted the belief that I was not the driving force in my life. I never accepted the idea that I need the government to determine my outcomes. As a political economist, I fully understand the political effects of how certain policies impact a person's true outcomes. Being able to understand the reasons why certain approaches are taken when we all know that it will not lead to the best or optimal outcomes for society. All too often, I am generally regarded as the person that is reasoned and rational when others may experience the typical hysteria surrounding many current events and social issues, frequently pointing out overreactions and constraints that show certain ideas as unworkable and far worse. Part of my preferred identity is to be focused on available facts, data, and evidence, rather than falling for the narrative-driven campaigns that are far too prevalent in our national discourse, news content, and our social conversations. Too many times, people in barbershops, grocery stores, or just out and about will see and assume I would support this idea, political candidate, or political view. When I counter their view with fact-driven arguments, they often are confused. There are times when people who know me are confused when I am not obedient to ideological leanings. They assume I would. When you are obedient to being driven by facts, evidence, and data, you are not obedient to any candidate or party. Sometimes it is difficult when people expect you to support something and you simply do not. Sometimes people find it easier to lose their identity to save face with others. Be your own person.
There is no denying that America still has issues with race, gender, and other demographic-based topics. But I do not believe for one second that it is as bad as the media wants you to believe it is. And I do not think that the identity politics that many are pushing will do anything but move society towards the divided society the proponents supposedly fight against. They say we cannot be a color-blind society. If you do not see color, you will not see racism. Clever quip. Good for selling a t-shirt or hat. But if you see everything in the framework of race and identity, then you will more likely than not fabricate discrimination or excuse it when convenient. Rather, we truly see things for what they are and what actually happened. For instance, we see the conflicting narratives about identity being used in our sports discourse, using identity politics to defend bad behaviors that are universally viewed as bad, regardless of demographic, but also used to claim offense by hysteria-driven fans. They say only discrimination can only be white versus the world. not being the multidirectional bad act that it truly is. We are seeing how identity politics is causing political progressives to rethink their foundational politics, as there is a lot more anti-Semitism among their base than they originally thought. Because one's identity is supposed to prevent them from being bad. The reality is anyone can be good, bad, or indifferent, based on the individual choices, attitudes, and behaviors. It is irresponsible to try to manage social stats to fit the identity narratives, like what we are seeing being done in terms of crime in our communities. A bad act is a bad act. It should be prosecuted in the same manner, regardless of demographics, and should not be amplified or reduced for demographics either. Justice is supposed to be blind and consistent, but the proponents are harming society by using identity as its goggles. Our identities help shape our persons, but it is the individual choices that we make that determine whether we are a good person or bad person. This is also something we need to discuss more in the future about how society is not able to accept that people are the deciders of their outcomes. We are going through great lengths to separate people from the responsibility and consequence of their choices, when we ought just accept that our decisions and actions have consequences. We all would be better off. No, that cannot be right. There must be an alternative explanation. See things for what they are. See the facts, evidence, and data, and create factor-based solutions. Not purposefully flawed ideas that are destined to fail and that creates real harm. Real problem solving requires addressing the actual issues, even when it requires having a difficult conversation on truths people do not want to accept.
A big thank you to all of you in the audience. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. I once heard a friend of mine give a crowd the best piece of advice you can give a group of teens that are trying to figure out who they are, where they fit, and what they want to do with their lives. Be yourself, because other people are already taken, and being great in life does not involve being like everyone else. I think we need people to be comfortable in their own skin, and, equally important, to be comfortable with other people being an individual. We are all unique individuals, with different backgrounds, experiences, and values. Some of us may look the same, speak the same language, eat similar diets, pray in the same manner, but we are all different. At the same time, the same in many ways. Appreciate our differences, but remember, all Americans want the same core desires: to be free to live life as we choose to, and the freedom to accept the responsibility of pursuing our path in life on our terms without infringing on others. Please further the Christopher Peter Review on social media, and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.